Overwatch 5 Conundrum. This guy sent me this on my Rivals gameplay video. About 24 minutes into Ralph's new video, reacted to the Gree video, he said Genji is one of the most oppressive heroes and that players shouldn't be expected to aim up. That's a joke, right? Long-time viewer and content enjoyer, but just had to check. That is not a joke. Low-ranked players and mid-ranked players do not like aiming up in general. It is not fun for the average person. Any character that makes you aim up is something that is going to be more oppressive to lower mid-ranked players. Like, that's pretty obvious, right? I'm not going crazy here. Should you be expected to? Of course you should be expected to at a medium to high level. And should that be a relevant thing in the video game? Yes, of course. That's one of the diverse things you can have in the video game, so why not? After a long day of my 9 to 5, I want to log on to Genji and go for backline assassinations like I've done since 2016 instead of playing a pseudo tank brawler who threatens people by not using cooldowns. Yeah, well, Blizzard disagrees. Blizzard thinks you need a higher health bar and lower ability to sustain off of light healing in the positions you could be, and they also think that hard peel on the enemy team isn't problematic, but general ability to sustain the enemy team is problematic. So yeah, they chose the most extreme things. They chose Suzu, they didn't choose Mercy being able to heal someone, or Zen Harmony, or being oh, I almost took my glass over on the keyboard. Just waving my hands about. Yeah, they don't think a Harmony Orb should be a relevant resource. But who knows how much of that is just completely forgetting. The simple fact is I do not think that the DPS passive should have targeted the healing resources that are necessarily lesser right now. Or at least if they did, I think they should have done it to a lesser degree, because I don't think Harmony Orb keeping a Tracer alive, or Mercy keeping a Genji alive when Genji's a little bit deep, but maybe not like crazy deep, is problematic in any way, shape, or form. I don't think that is the sustain we were talking about. But we got that removed, so realistically Genji can hold less space without trading stuff, right? Because if he trades any health, he's going to get pushed out, and therefore we end up in a situation where you have to AFK in that space and threaten with cooldowns. It's a terrible situation. I fucking hate it, but that's where we are. It sucks. And the fact that I apparently am not good enough at communicating this for even like in a long form conversation Spylo to recognize what I mean, that's problematic in my mind. And I think obviously that's my failing in communication, but I don't think that's my failing in logic, because nobody's logicked me out of this position or attempted to logic me out of this position at this point. The Overwatch 5v5 Conundrum, let's see what you've got.
Hello everyone. I'd like to jump into the fray and add my perspective about the 6v6 or 5v5 debate in Overwatch, and I'm just going to jump right into it. Overwatch's issue, regardless of the format, has always been defensive and sustained creep, whether it's in the form of AoE healing, immortality abilities, or crowd control. The common theme of—
Hey, you notice there that in his list, he actually doesn't specify the type of healing that I like. The Mercy healing, the Zen healing, that type of stuff. AoE healing, crowd control, like strong, fast peel is what people don't like.
These abilities, especially when combined on one hero, is free value. Heroes need clear weaknesses so they can be outplayed, and 5v5 makes this worse and forces the bad design, which degrades the gameplay.
Yep, of course.
So you might ask yourself, what was the biggest—
When you have one less tank, you necessarily have to be able to interact with the DPS more, and you necessarily have to be able to interact with the tank less, or at least not be able to turn off the enemy tank in the way that you interact with them. So quite a lot of the individual ability cooldowns that hated more on tank have to be reduced. Quite a lot of the things like projectile speeds have to be increased, and therefore you end up in a situation where there's a lot less diversity in the format.
Who is the role that experienced the greatest change going from 6v6 to 5v5? Well, without an off tank, you might think, well, the main tank, right? Well, I would say, while there are good arguments for that, I would say no, it was actually the supports were most affected by this. In the beta era, you might recall, support players were saying that they weren't having fun. And this was because supports were more exposed than ever. Without the protection of an off tank to intercept flankers, supports were having to take aim duels.
Yeah, weirdly enough, this wasn't the very high-ranked support players that were complaining for the most part. It was the lower mid-ranked support players that ended up having no angle control on their team without somebody aggressively doing the angle control. It's difficult to say who was affected most. I think supports definitely ended up being pushed into the more duelist role when the average ranked support player in general doesn't want to do that. That's why they pick support in the first place. Obviously, some people do want to do that, and that's absolutely fine. I think that's valid to have in the game, but we should choose a format that had the most diversity in types of available playstyle in my mind. And I feel like in 5v5, especially after Season 9, the playstyle of just healing your team used to be bad, now it's invalid. That's my take on supports in general. I think you should be able to get your gamer girl Mercy player and then hold left click on you and then do okay-ish, right? Somebody that has really no interest in the mechanics of the game or even 1v1s or even fighting enemies. I think they should be okay. They are currently not in the current gameplay. So essentially what happened is at the start of Overwatch 2, supports felt horribly oppressed because there was nobody controlling the space, so DPS could get straight into the space. DPS was still incredibly sharp, because DPS have always been incredibly sharp in the way that they do damage to you. If they can get into that space, which now was completely free because they didn't have to trade resources in order to get there. So essentially the game felt like everything was coming at you from all sides, which just sucks. I'm sorry, nobody actually really likes that. So what happened is the natural thing that happened, all the support players that wanted to actually support quit the game. They didn't quit the game, but obviously their playstyle had been invalidated, so they turned over time into more duelist oriented players, and or they quit the game or moved on to other things, not necessarily quit the game full stop, but maybe moved out of comp, moved into quick play where they didn't have to sweat as hard in order to get value. So they basically curated their audience for this new support playstyle, which was basically an angle controlling DPS. And it wasn't that this was, and to be clear, this was always the correct thing to do. Like, angle controlling DPS style of supports while doing some sustain was always better than just doing sustain. It always has been, but it became mandatory, and I don't think that was good for the game. So that's really what happened with supports over time. I think that's probably where supports are now-ish. I know Moira feels bad for Moira players. I know Lucio feels bad for Lucio players. A lot of talk about not being able to progress on those characters, specifically because you have to save all your resources, in my opinion, because of Season 9 healing reduction and health pool increases. You have to save all your resources, use them all at once. I know Mercy feels awful. Zen players don't exist, so that character kind of like doesn't get mentioned because his Discord orb got changed around too much and they all quit. I wish Zen players didn't exist. I wish more of Zen's value was in the Harmony Orb instead of Discord, right? I'd take 5% off Discord and then I'd put an extra 10 HPS on the Harmony, and I think Zen would more or less see a little bit more play. I think there's problems with mobility creep on Zen. Yeah, so DPS, as a result of all these changes, they had a little bit of their sharpness taken off on purpose in Season 9, right? They reinstated most of this sharpness over time, right? Hanzo, Junkrat, all of these combos, all this sharp stuff in the game got reinstated over time because, in my opinion, they were a core component of the game that it didn't fucking work without it. Because if you have sustain and you don't have insta-kills, half the people that like the insta-kills don't actually enjoy the game or can't cut through the sustain, right? There's two ways to cut through sustain. You either play the resources game or you fucking murder people in one hit, right? So yeah, DPS players basically, because of Season 9, because of the higher health pools, they got moved into a more off-tank style role where people like Genji had to space control by not using abilities, and that's what we're talking about there. The Genji kind of like pushes into the enemy team, doesn't do anything because of the threat of the dash there. He's kind of like controlling that space, and because Genji has a lower health pool, he's got deflect and stuff like that. He can kind of just exist in space, which is what is kind of like needed in the 5v5 format. Tanks, obviously, like we had the entire period before Season 9 where tanks had a horrible experience. So yeah, who's been hurt more? I don't think it's clear. I think everyone's been hurt
all the time. And these players were not really equipped for this, as they were able to just, hide behind the boring 66 double shield, goats meta, whatever, right? Well, because of this feedback, Blizzard had to take action. What did they do? Well, they buffed the wazoo out of supports, and they wanted to make that role fun, because that was the role that they were really worried that wouldn't be fun in 5v5.
It's so funny, because what happens when you change things around is the player base gets destabilized, people quit the game, the player base goes down, and then you slowly farm back up the player base. So essentially what they did is they made it so it was just about okay to play a little bit more of a passive playstyle on support, and all the players that wanted to play a bit more of a passive playstyle have to go to support now. So support vastly outnumbers DPS.
Right, you've got open lanes for DPS to shoot from, which is kind of the whole point of switching to it, and also the tank queues, so they wanted to, have like one tank, so they'll just make them Giga, so that way it's more enjoyable.
Allegedly.
For the tank players as well.
Allegedly. No fucking tank players, so is it more enjoyable?
So that way they can get more tank people playing. Well, turns out they, over time, ridiculously buffed supports and gave them this absurd passive, which I guess now everyone gets, but supports is still 2.5 seconds, and DPS and tanks only get it every after 5 seconds, which is a health regen out of combat. And the funny thing, though, is that supports were already about as good as DPS in duels in Overwatch 1, but now they had to be outright and explicitly better. Brig Inspired was just left unaddressed because 5v5 makes it harder to abuse it. You can't hide behind shields or, multiple...
See, the thing that I had disagreements with Greed over, and I don't think it was really disagreements, it was just left out of the context of the last video that I responded to from Greed, was that DPS shouldn't be able to beat supports in duels necessarily, right? Like, they should be about even, and tanks and DPS and tanks and supports should also be about even in a 1v1 duel. But DPS necessarily have more sharp damage sources and can project those damage sources in a more sharp way. So what happens when you remove the ability for DPS to project those sharp damage sources in a way that matters, because you still have denial with Suzu and Lamp and other things that are bursty in the game, but you also remove the ability for these characters to project pressure with poke over a 5 to 10 second period, because if they take chip, they can't be active for that burst when they want to. What happens when you remove both, right? Why does DPS feel bad, right? I can't dive onto them, they've got a Suzu, I can't stand here and shoot them, I'll get chipped down every single damn time. So what's the alternative between those two? Guys, what's the lowest common denominator here? I ain't pressing my buttons, I'm just gonna sit here and control space by having the deflect button and the dash button available. Yippee, that's what you do.
Tanks and so forth, but it's still a mad mechanic. They also double and triple down on immortality abilities with Kiriko and Lifeweaver, because these types of undo abilities are necessary to extend team fights so they don't just end instantly. The fun of Overwatch is the ebb and flow of the team fight, the tide in, the tide out, right? That's what makes it different from other shooters, is healing. That's actually a huge aspect of the game. But what did this end up doing? Tanks then became miserable because of this, and we get immense tank power creep after that, even after they were already made Giga. So with one tank per team, there are only two options. Either one tank is hard meta, or the counter pickathon ensues. Nobody, except certain content creators, like counterpicking, or at least feeling forced to counterpick. And every tank being meta has kind of sucked, I would say. Jotes, Zarya, Bubbles, /Suzu, Cycling, Sustain meta, Gigahawk.
Jotes is such a cursed term, by the way.
One-shot meta, Doomfist meta that lasted 2 weeks, Unkillable Ball meta, Robacha Forever meta, Orisa deployment and Sustain meta after Alari released, AFK Amagamirs meta. Every single one was kind of...
I'm okay with tanks and supports having a chance in a duel, but it being even to me just feels wrong, sorry. If you get to have the advantages of self-sustain, support tank abilities, as well as safer positioning, then you should have less duel potential. I'm okay Zen being a good duelist because he doesn't have those survivability choices during duels, unlike Kiri, who can duel you just fine and have all the sustain. Yeah, agreed entirely. It's the reason why we've reduced Kiri's sustain significantly on our patch, because Kiri's Suzu cannot exist without Kiri being a duelist, in my opinion. I think Suzu is too good on a single target unless we completely change around the effect of Suzu in a way. So Kiri has to be a duelist. So then what do? Right? You make it so that moving Kiri off an angle, getting her to TP out actually means something. And that's what we tried to do. By reducing her sustain, so that if she's not able to put out angular pressure, she's very much not doing as much as she could otherwise do, even if she's able to still spam kunais down main. Like, moving her off the angle now does something, which is really nice. I don't feel like it's eminently feelable straight away, because obviously people are still used to the old version, but yeah. As for supports having an even duel with DPS, I mean, I guess the question is, what is an even duel? Yes, necessarily will have chances to be lethal onto supports that supports do not have back onto the DPS in a duel, right? Unless we're talking specifically about Kiri, fine, I'm entirely fine with that. But the duel still happens in an even way, even if the DPS aren't able to put out that pressure onto supports, because the resources for the entire team are being baited by that duel happening in the first place. If you get out a Suzu, you get out a Lamp, that is value, even if it doesn't feel it. Don't get me wrong, I don't think the entire game should revolve around taking cooldowns for the enemy team, but I feel like there should be a fun interplay there where they have that cooldown, but however also you have a chance to kill them through that cooldown or around that cooldown. And I feel like DPS for the most part do have that. I think the thing I'm missing at the moment is just the ability to be constantly active, so I can force out that cooldown through poke instead of having to force out that cooldown through mostly a dive, right? I don't feel like I'm able to poke as much now on any DPS, specifically because 30% less healing whenever we do anything, right?
Trash. I don't know if there's anybody who looks at an Overwatch 2 meta fondly from the past. And as for any the other 3 tanks that didn't have a super fun sucking period of dominance in ladder QP, I would say Diva DM is now a ludicrous, yes, necessary length. Winston, he either gets counterpicked by a full team or he just endlessly dives their backline for free. And Ryan is only really viable when he's given too many stats. There's not really an ideal balance for tanks in 5v5. DPS, after this, becomes yet again an irrelevant role. And wow, looks like both the new support designs and the Giga tanks are trash. Who knew? So the devs had to make it so that they gave us baby bullets so that bronze players can land shots consistently. They extended TTK with the HP changes, which made tanks even more Giga and even less.
By the way, I've said it a couple of times, I'm pretty much fine with the hitbox sizes where they are. I don't really have a problem with it. You say like baby bullets so anyone can land it. Yeah, that's what it is. Like, we're pretty obvious that's what it is, but because Overwatch has infinite acceleration and you can move AD strafing like in one frame, you need something like that because Overwatch is horrendously hard to onboard in terms of the aiming system. People don't realize it, but this is one of the hardest games to get into at the base level. That is so lucky that there's so many heroes that don't require aim and have generous lock-ons and other things like that, because Overwatch is fucking hard, man. Like, really difficult. I think people that have been in the game for a while don't really get that. So I'm fine with the bigger hitboxes. I think that if you keep the health pools more or less the same, people kind of just adjust pretty fast because the bigger hitboxes, more reliable damage coming into you, therefore you're able to predict it better, right? There's less peaks and there's less valleys when the hitboxes are bigger in the damage output of most characters because they're more likely to hit you more often reliably. So you don't disrespect them, you don't not press your buttons because you don't expect them to hit you. If there's an Ashe looking at you, they're probably going to hit you twice in a row, the majority of the time at a gold level, right? You expect that now. But before, it was like, I mean, they've got a 40% chance of hitting me every single time they shoot, and if they hit me in the head, I die, like, pretty damn fast, so you can disrespect it, and you can die to it pretty fast. Back to the most egregious example, easily one of the best duelists in the game, even without the DPS passive, and has all of his effective health. I think that's way too insane. Yeah, I think the enhanced shift was egregious and never needed to be in the game in the first place. The trouble is, basically what Blizzard did with support is they moved to a format that supports wouldn't enjoy, and then they didn't embrace the fact that they'd have to delete quite a bit of their player base in order to get supports to enjoy it. So what they did was they just made them good at everything, right? Instead of saying, well, you're not supports anymore, you are DPS support hybrid characters, and just like deleting some of the sustain, they just kept the sustain and they upped the DPS. It is what it is.
Interactive. And they gave DPS an overpowered passive to force them into relevancy. All of this just so we can keep those extended teamfights and brawls that Overwatch made its name on without too much sustain. They didn't want to nerf supports directly, so this is the route they took. Well, there's a side effect to this. This also drastically lowered the skill expression, which is kind of the entire fun of the DPS role.
Yeah, 100%.
Before
you reduce sharp lethality in the game, you make it so you can't stand in medium range. It's really difficult. We agree a lot more than it comes across. Yeah, of course we do. Of course we do. But the drams is good for the YouTube, right? No. There's also the thought that with the DPS passive is actually, by the looks of it, tried as a out of combat healing buff instead and reducing the numbers, but realistically the answer is I don't know what they were thinking with the DPS passive. They clearly want to stop sustain in mid fights. I don't know if it was just preventing lowering supports numbers. If it was just preventing lowering supports numbers, I don't know how successful it was in just doing that. I mean, it hits so many different characters so differently. DPS passive and Season 9 in general are really becoming thorns in my side for enjoying the game.
2-tap someone with a large percentage of the heroes in the DPS roster, and now it takes 3 hits. And this applies to tanks and supports too. Ana, with her 70 damage that can't crit, is now a 4-shot instead of a 3-shot. So even though these shots are easier to hit, there are so many moments where you only have time to land 2 hits, and then the opportunity is lost. So in that window, you might land both your shots, but the character you're shooting is not going to die. And this is going to happen really consistently now. So you're always just getting baited with, well, I'm hitting them, but nothing's actually dying.
Yeah, and there's more time to react for the peel abilities, right? You've got more time to hit your Suzu on the floor. The damage coming into you is more reliable, so you're more able to predict when Genji's damage is coming in. If you are playing Kiri, you have a higher health pool, so you have more time to react in that way. And also, like, you can poke out the Genji more. It's really bad for DPS having this passive on. And we're going to just assume one stray bullet actually hits the Genji, and the Genji can't be healed quite fast. I suggested having an out-of-combat healing boost and having base number be for in-combat situations. You see, Squeed, the reason why they can't do that is then they'd have to actually give a shit about balancing the base numbers, which clearly, if anything, they've given up on at this point. The question is whether they want Moira's healing to be consistently outpacing other characters' healing. Probably not, but I don't think it matters for them, because in combat, their healing isn't enough to make anything go infinite anyway, right? So Moira's healing can't be a problem, even if it's unbalanced compared to the other characters and the mode of healing it is, because, well, it doesn't matter if you've got an Ana or you've got a Moira, they're dying anyway. They have to be aggressive. So basically, it's a sidestep around having to even think about balancing support healing numbers in relation to each other. And I think that's Brig right now. Brig is extremely problematic in my mind in terms of the numbers, and you only aren't seeing this because of the DPS passive. Brig has been buffed to shit in terms of the amount that they heal in general, and this character is like really toxic, but whatever. Their healing numbers don't matter because we just skipped out on... it's not that they're toxic, it's that they're badly balanced in relation to other characters, so other characters can do the things that Brig does worse, right? That's the problem. Pretty crazy how the balance team alone manages to overshadow just how good of a job the rest of the people working on the game are doing. It's hard. I'm glad Custard's here to save the day.
Before, those two shots are harder to hit, and yeah, you might not hit them as often, but when you do hit them, it's going to feel way more satisfying because one, it was harder to land, and is higher skill to do, but two, it'll actually net you a result. So what does this also do? It makes it much harder to come back from a deficit, or even feel the difference when you were mechanically better than someone. The interactions in the game are feeling more and more guaranteed, which contributes to the counterpicking issue. So soft counters feel even more like hard counters, and hard counters feel darn near impossible to deal with. And also, why even play the game when it feels like the results are predetermined? And how are we back in the spot where sustain is now increasing yet again? It's just absolutely bonkers. So in 5v5, the roles trap each other. It's a three-way standoff between them, where one role will always lose out when another gains. Tank is too strong, other roles get ran over, and tank diff determines the entire game. Only one player on each team really determines who wins and who loses. DPS are too strong, the game becomes team deathmatch, and any MOBA aspect or Overwatchness is lost. Support's too strong, the game becomes boring for everyone except the AFK Andes spamming heals into their tank. In 6v6, you can just remove the role passives, revert all the stupid 5v5 specific changes, such as Ana Sleep Dart lasting only 3.5 seconds on tanks versus 5 seconds on other heroes, Cass having damage reduction when he does literally anything, Hog and Moira abilities being able to be used in their ults so they could have more versatility, Orisa not headshotable and Fortify yet again, and we need to finally address what broke the game originally. We need to alter the functionality of immortality abilities and finally address Bring Inspire mechanics, give heroes clear weaknesses again, no more free value abilities and heroes. That's ultimately what is destroyed.
I don't have a problem with free value abilities and heroes. I think that's one of the things. I think there can be a certain amount of free value in heroes and it'd be fine. I think the problem is the lack of aggressive options given to characters with their big cooldowns, right? I think that the way that Suzu should be used is to go and fucking duel somebody on an angle and commit to it with Suzu, right? That should be a good use of Suzu. Or, however, the alternative is we should give Suzu the 40% movement speed by default, and you should be throwing that at your tanks in order to be able to make them do more. I don't think any of this really works in 5v5, though. The trouble is there's so many problems with the format that the entire game basically has to morph in order to be even slightly viable. And I don't think you can fix many of these problems. I think the game just kind of like is where it had to be because of the problems made by 5v5 in general. So, yeah, free value can exist, but it should be offset by either not being too strong or some other parts of the hero kit compensating for it. Of course, yeah. Of course, 100%.
I play every role, and at this point, I have little fun on any of them. It feels like squeezing water from a stone. Sadly, Genji, Doomfist, Reinhardt, Lucio, etc., are not in any other video game and are trapped inside Overwatch 2. If only I could go back and play Overwatch 1 or 6v6 Overwatch 3. Apparently it's too much work to make 6v6 in Overwatch 2, but some guys were able to balance 6v6 better than Blizzard did in 6 years.
Was this video put out before June? June was after Season 9, right? Yeah, June was after Season 9. Season 9 was kind of like May. So this is post Season 9 before 6v6. It's so funny how forward he is on his thoughts.
It was swallow their pride.
Unfortunately, they released 6v6 and they fucked it. Sorry to tell you. They screwed it up by increasing all tank cooldowns by like 3 seconds for no reason in particular. Excellent. Love that, Blizzard. Thank you for that. Just completely ruined my format for no reason at all because you can't be asked to balance cardiac overdrive back down by like 15%. Love that for you.
Blame the failures in the old dev team and use the ZHSKW patch notes, and it could be out in a week or even a day, and it would be better than any balance patch we had in Overwatch 1. It'd be like adding 10 heroes all at once to Overwatch 1, which would make a bigger impact than both launching Overwatch 2 or...
The trouble with the blanket changes is it always feels like giving up to me, and I've come to see it in my mind as giving up 100%. I feel like Blizzard's balance philosophy is there will never be such a thing as perfect balance, so ... fuck it. Right? I feel like that's their balance philosophy at this point. Flip the table every couple of months, give them something fresh. They'll chew on crap for a bit as long as we put a little bit of chicken sprinkles on it, right? Like that's how I feel their balance philosophy is at this point. And as long as we keep replacing it with fresh stuff every now and again, no matter what the fresh stuff is, no matter what the quality is, they'll never be happy, right? I always got this in the past that there was the Fredo moment where he talked about the October patch back in the day where he was like, well, the October patch wouldn't have been good in a couple of months' time. And I'm like, well, it was a step in the right direction though, right? Like, it was a step in the right direction. And there is things to be known about what feels fun in the video game, right? There is things to be known about what is bad in the video game. And stepping in random directions or different directions than that, just because it's easier to do and you can keep the freshness in the game, doesn't feel like a positive thing for me. I don't think soldiers should be able to sprint at fucking Mach 10. Right? Very simple things. I don't think that's fun and interactive. I don't think Moira should be able to fade to the other half of the map. I don't think anything about that is fun and interactive. The cooldown was that way for the reason that it was okay, right? Like it was interactive when it was actually smaller. So yeah, they've really embraced Mach 10, honestly, rival style balancing at this point, especially with perks. The thing is, I just don't think the Overwatch, I don't think the Overwatch team is capable of putting out that content at such a fast manner as the rivals team, right? You can't outcompete the slop giant on slop, right? They've been shoveling shit for years on mobile games. Why are we getting down into the muck with them and going to shovel with them with a trowel? Why are we doing that? We're the quality company. Why aren't we making quality? Why are we balancing through Season 9 and DPS passives? And why are we just changing around things with like an even keel across everyone for no reason instead of just embracing the core fundamentals of what make the game good and poking at that and prodding at that and working out what's good design space in a general sense, right? That's my problem. I don't know what Blizzard is doing in terms of their balance philosophy at this point. I don't know if on a whiteboard there is just change shit fast enough so they don't notice it might be bad, right? I feel like that might even be something in their office, right? Just keep, you know what? Sweeping big changes, keep the meta moving, make Tracer really good this month, like 6 damage, woo, Tracer time, woo, we get to play Tracer for a bit, and now you're playing Hanzo, because Hanzo's really good, but I don't want that. I just want a game where more or less everything is viable at a baseline before I even start, and things aren't left behind, right? I have a hero-based shooter, the highest diversity of a roster in a game ever, and I'm, instead of just using that, I'm playing with a third of it, and not able to use the rest. They're too attached to hero fantasy. The reason Sojourn Rail is strong, because a hero fantasy is supposed to be that. Same with Sombra being a hack stealth bot, because it's the hero fantasy, you can't change the hero fantasy. Yeah, but hero fantasy is core to heroes, 100%. Like, it is core to heroes. I think the problem with Sojourn is just that Sojourn gets too much space because of the slide. I think the slide genuinely should have been much shorter in the distance it travels. It travels too long, they can go too deep, and the rest of the kit is more or less based around that because of it. I don't think the one-shot is invalid per se. I think the one-shot would be a lot less problematic if And here's the kicker. I think the one-shot would be a lot less problematic if we weren't post-season 9, where you cannot get Sojourn out the angle because they have a higher health pool, and they're applying a DPS passive to you from that angle, right? Sojourn now just peaks at full health, uses that full health bar, gets the fuck out. She perfectly made for this new bursty mode of Overwatch. She perfectly made for it. 2 slides? Yay! Yeah, instead of doing anything about that, why don't we make it even worse? Woohoo! Yay! I enjoy my slop. I just pour it into the trough for me. Ooh, I get to kill people with my 2 slides. I'm sure that doesn't have ramifications on the gameplay in any way, shape, or form. Slop, slop, slop.
Launching the PvE combined. So ultimately, we're not for 6v6 because it fixes the game. We're for 6v6 because it allows us to fix the game. There's still a large amount of work to be done after you go to 6v6. But honestly, most of that's been already done by the 7HSKW people. So
and do you know what they did with the 7HSKW people? They completely ignored them. Thank you, Blizzard, for completely ignoring the people that had literally made the mode for you, and all you had to do was copy and paste it. Love that. 3 seconds extra on every single cooldown. That's what I wanted. Thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate that. Woohoo! So much fun. 250 health pools and DPS passive, even though it's clearly not relevant to the format. Love it. More slop, please. Throw it in the trough for me.
What I'm trying to say here is that the roles are kind of in a standoff where one will never actually, or they can never all actually be fun at the same time. And 5v5 kind of forces us to make the same terrible decisions and the balance philosophy of Overwatch 1 that killed the game.
What's that mode? You don't know 7HSKW? 7HSKW was the original 6v6 adjustment server. It was the original code to remake 6v6 with 200 health pools pre-season 9 with no passives.
What chased people off was the amount of sustain and defense mitigation creep and the free value abilities.
It's the base of my my FSJQS code, 7HSKW, and then we built on that as we went. Would you rather a massive workshop update that fixes everything or £10,000? I will take your £10,000, please.
That's why people didn't.
The workshop update in real value will not provide £10,000 of value to me.
I don't want to play this game anymore, and that's why tank queues got so long. If that wasn't in the game as much, which we can only really try to do without 5v5, in 5v5 the game's just going to become TDM if we take this out, right? If we have an honorable, honest Overwatch, 5v5 just can't work because it's just going to become TDM where, unless you're like high level Overwatch League teams, you're not going to really be able to actually feel that ebb and the flow. It's not really going to be Overwatch anymore, right? So it kind of forces us to have this bad design with 5v5.
No, he's entirely right.
6v6, we can go back and redo all these wrongs, and it's really honest.
But as Random says, I don't see how Blizzard can undo all their horrible ideas at once and still and maintain their pride and egos 100%. Yeah, there's a reason why we didn't get 200 health pools, no DPS passive 6v6 with less passives in general in the game. There's a reason for it, right? Like, I think Didac's mental health is worth more than 10k. It's worth 10k to him, yeah. I would take the 10k for me. I mean, if I take the workshop getting updates, then everyone gets a little bit of value. But if I get 10k, I get 10k, right? So
honestly, the 5v5 6v6 discussion is just the latest venue of the same battle to save Overwatch from their development philosophy, which is stop making a game that was difficult and deep and making it easier over time.
That was a really damn good video. Yeah, he was clearly ahead of his time. That guy. If he just amped up his presentation style, made a couple more of these, this guy would be great. It's weird how much hype they put into the workshop and stuff, and then they immediately abandon it for some reason. People are saying that somebody got fired on the workshop team or left the Overwatch team from the workshop team and took some stuff with them, and it was then very awkward for them to develop on top of it. We know there's been multiple redundancies, so I think it's pretty understandable them cutting the workshop at some point, especially since it's pretty clear in the merger. Aaron was probably just told, dude, get rid of like a third of your staff, and he was like, fuck. And so So he did in any way that he could without impacting the core product. And I think Workshop is obviously going to take hits for things like that. It just makes sense. And restarting development of those projects that provide you value in not the 3-month period, but in the 9-month and year-long period, that's requires quite a bit of input in order to get like down with the coding. If you get what that's my coder's lingo there. Impressed the Workshop even survived the move? Yeah, no, 100% me. Yeah, 100%. Workshop is free effort, self-generating free work. Yes, but if you're doing a merger and you're told to cut a third of your staff, I can entirely understand the Workshop people being the one to go. If you have an artist that's putting out good work and a Workshop person that is providing value to the game in a non-direct manner, they're going to be the ones that go. Sadly, it just is what it is, right? Put the Stadium people onto Workshop. Man, Stadium is such slop.